Like we could have molded 3 bits of plastic and some metal frames and screwed them all together, but that's not a singular unit, right?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the eSkate Chat podcast. On this one, we're going to talk about build materials and in specifically the carbon fiber. So we got Jared, he's our industrial designer. Do you want to run us through what are like some of the use case for carbon fiber as a material in the real world, different industries? Why do people actually use it?
Yeah, it's used in like the aerospace, automotive industry. Like we were talking about high performance vehicles. Basically, it's lightweight, super stiff, high tensile strength. So you can get like a really strong, large structure, but still very lightweight. That's basically the main use for it. So you see it in like the bodywork of cars, or you see it in like propeller blades, wind turbines, things like that. So basically you get these really nice, large surface areas that have a very specific form requirement. Like the shape's really important, but you're also keeping it really strong. And yeah, that's probably the main uses for it.
What sort of materials does it usually replace, or is it doing things that others can't do?
Well, I guess in very similar to our use cases, like say a propeller traditionally would have been made out of like a wood or something like that. So it replaces something like that, like because wood, is lightweight. It does have like an internal structure that's lighter. Some woods are heavy, but yeah, like wooden materials is definitely something that it was traditionally replacing. Yeah.
Plastics as well?
Plastics in cars.
Steel,
like forging processes, especially again in cars, like brackets and things like that. They used to be forged. They definitely use carbon in those areas now as well.
So yeah, full circle, you essentially used it to replace or change up what you were doing with wood.
Yeah, that's right. So when we first made our very first electric skateboards, we had a pintail, which was a bamboo product, and we had a snub nose series, and these were, traditional longboard inspired products, skateboards. But then, the vision was like, how do we make a board that didn't look electric but was electric? And the vision was always trying to incorporate electrics inside of a deck. And I knew that we wouldn't be able to do this in bamboo. It'd just be too hard. I couldn't imagine, because it's layered and then it's pressed. And then if we did it, then I guess maybe it'd have to be cut out afterwards, and then you'd lose that strength.
Bamboo, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. And so, I was just looking around, and I was thinking, could you use plastics or like maybe fiberglass? And then it was doing more research. It's like, carbon fiber. We know carbon fiber is super strong. It's stiff. And you can shape it. And, doing that into a skateboard, well, that's kind of what we need. If we did a cavity of some sort and had electrics inside, that carbon fiber would give us the strength that we need. And sure enough, we made our first one, started playing around with it, and it was in late 2012, I think. That's when we came up with the idea, and then we had our first sample in 2013, probably it was, about early to mid. And it was a fantastic board. It was quite long, and we had the battery incorporated into the deck mostly. And
it was a different design to the GTRs now, right?
Oh, completely.
The format, yeah.
Completely different. The shape was completely different. It had like a little kick tail at the end. And the reason why we had a kick tail there is because we put the receiver inside the kick tail, and then it hid the motor, which was at the back of the board. It was a huge step at the time for electric skateboarding, because there were no other electric skateboards out there that were using carbon fiber, let alone trying to incorporate batteries and controllers inside the deck. We didn't quite achieve what we wanted to with this board. It was so slimline, this product, and it was fantastic. And we didn't use 18650 cells back then as well, so that was a bit of space saving. So it was mega thin profile, and it had a little bit of flex in it, the deck, I remember. And the process to get to where it was, I remember when the first one rocked up, I was just blown away by the shape and the look of it. It looked so techy and so futuristic. But I still remember the first ride I did. I went and picked up my son at school, as I was living at Broadbeach at the time, I skated in. There was only 2K away, and he doubled with me on the board. And then we went down this dip. This was the very first sample. Went down this dip. The whole deck just went snap.
I was going to ask, so how many samples did you have to go through? Like, if it was never done before, how did you find the start point to actually make it? And then how long did it take to get that to the production of the first gen carbon?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first board was all designed on computer. You know, we had like sketches and an overall shape that we had in mind. So it started from that, all on 3D. And then I sourced different carbon fiber factories, because they didn't make skateboard decks. It was just carbon products. And then, that's where it started, and invested, made a few tools and molds. And then the first samples, they all broke. That's it.
Because it's not just the mold itself, it's the layering of the carbon inside that mold. So once you get the shape right, cool, tick, feels good underneath your foot, but then you got to strengthen it, and that's a whole other process.
And that's exactly right. That's where it started. And fair enough, it ticked all the boxes of the design, but structurally, it wasn't any good. So I reckon we went through about maybe 7 or 8 different samples before it finally didn't break. And then some of the testing there was like bouncing on the deck, and we didn't do like a full like hardcore jump on it because, of course it's probably going to break. But that's it. It was a fantastic step for the industry, and at the time, and one of the challenges we definitely faced too with when we first made the very first board is that I had so we had a carbon fiber bottom, carbon fiber top, and then I went to use the board first time, it wouldn't work. It's like it blocked all the signal, the carbon fiber, it shielded it. And oh man, it took about 3-4 days to work out what it was. So then we took the receiver out, had it hanging under the board, and then it finally worked. So then that's when we had to get creative and cut a hole on the back of the kicktail and then have a plastic case in there and then cover it with grip tape, and it worked.
Yeah.
we solved the problem.
Carbon's also conductive, isn't it? So it's got the batteries have to be like properly insulated.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we found that a few times as well, like live terminals sort of touching the insides of the deck, and you get sparks. And
now everything's enclosed in its own enclosure basically to separate it from any of the carbon. Yeah.
I've definitely seen that in the GT models when people have tried to make aftermarket batteries.
Yeah.
And they've made the battery bigger, so they've done away with the case.
Yeah.
But then these terminals are touching the carbon and it shorts the whole thing out.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the other limitations with that Gen 1 too is that we had the case underneath and had a bunch of screws all the way around. And when you were riding along, the deck had a little bit of flex. What we found is some of the screws used to work its way out, and often a lot of our riders were losing screws, and sometimes half the battery starts hanging out. So we had to fix a lot of design problems there with the next reiteration, which was the carbon GT deck. And that was the massive step forward for us. Like, we fully solved the problem of encasing the electrics all inside the deck. And we started designing that probably around mid to late 2013, and took a few years until we finally launched it. It was a big one for us. We got to make it smaller. We had a drop down shape, and it was a big step for us. And that deck shape ended up forming the next series of boards, which was the GTR, and not the Hadian though. The Hadian had some reminiscence of what the GTR and Carbon GT was, but we just turn that into a whole new beast.
The GT and GTR is such a great use of carbon fiber. Like, when you look at a cross section of it, and like you said, it's all enclosed, it's all assembled from above compared to the earlier one.
Yeah.
That piece of carbon across the bottom is tiny. It's like a millimeter all the way across. It's incredible how thin it is and how strong it is.
Yeah.
At the same time,
and it looks great too.
It does. It's all
aesthetically
that one form, and it's got that the weave matte of the GTR with the matte carbon looks fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a really nice finish.
Yeah. But it's not. That deck is so hard to make.
Yeah.
Like, man, it's so costly to make. It's made by hand. So much goes into it, which then drives the cost of the end product up through the roof for the final customer, and it's hard to make.
It is incredible, like that they are handmade. Like I always, when I tell people about the product, and it's like a surfboard, it's like this handcrafted thing. Like where like it's mass produced. Definitely, we make a lot of them, but at the end of the day, it's people layering up the carbon in a very exact, precise way and getting it right every single time. And that's a really hard thing to do. It's really time consuming. It takes a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very impressive when you see the finished result because you can't just do that with a machine.
Crazy. I remember when we went to the carbon factory and it was time staking, like watching these people do it, because not only was it laying the carbon, but they had those sort of like wire rod things to reinforce certain sections. There was so many elements to it that you do not know looking at
like
the final product.
We talk about it as one thing, like the deck, but there's so much inside that shape. Like even the carbon's laid across the shoulders in different directions versus how it's run across the length of it, like where the drop downs are. Like each area has like a build up of different bits of carbon. It's crazy.
I think there's a like misconception in eSkate in general, because it comes from, I guess, performance cars, that carbon is used to make things lighter. So originally, I guess you were trying to enclose something. So it was more about the form of getting electronics inside a board.
Well, yeah, it was. But the very first Gen 1 deck, it was definitely about form, trying to shape electronics and the deck around that. But originally I was like, okay, this is going to be light. And it needs to be strong. I knew that. But to be honest, the final deck weight was very similar to what the bamboos were. So it wasn't a huge weight saving by any means, but it really allowed us to. It was all about form. We were able to get creative with that shape around the electronics.
Yeah, and we've seen that in every series. The bamboo might be like 5% lighter all the way through GT, GTR, and now the Haitian.
Yeah,
I guess because you still need external cases and more stuff to make the bamboo work.
It's true.
Yeah, definitely like the lightweight factor like gets removed because where the board's next to nothing, because it's all about the battery case, especially in the carbon now. Like we're basically removing as much material as possible. So they're always going to be pretty similar at the end of the day. The board's all battery nowadays.
So let's talk about the Haitian. I guess how we use carbon fiber have to be rethought and the whole process get redesigned compared to what we were doing for GT, GTR?
Yeah, well, definitely the Haitian, we're utilizing carbon fiber not for its like weight saving properties, but purely for like the forms we can achieve for it while still being really strong. So like, we've talked about how we've removed all that material from the middle, but we've got all these complex right angles and lips and ledges. So except the battery case, we need to be able to screw in to the deck itself as well to mount everything to it. We need to be able to support the trucks. So we need to like reinforce those areas. And again, we want it all to be the one form. Like we could have molded 3 bits of plastic and some metal frames and screwed them all together, but that's not a singular unit, right? That becomes bitsy, a bit haphazard, Frankensteining. But
it definitely gave us more flexibility in producing that shape and the end function that we really wanted, compared to the normal like the GTR carbon that we use. So the using forged was certainly a consideration. It was a genuine. It's not an aesthetic thing for us. It was like a material design choice that allowed us to get a result.
Like layering up like the traditional weaved carbon like we would have done the GTR and the Haitian would have been really complex in some of those tight small areas where we've dropped the battery case into, the poor person having to layer up tiny little pieces, cut it up tiny, whereas the forge basically embraces the fact that you can put all these tiny pieces of multi-directional carbon weaves pieces and then get the same shape.
I mean, we could have used forged on the carbon GTR as well. We've been playing around with that material for a little while, but using forged on the entire carbon GTR is not an efficient way of making a product. By any means. Like it's not the most environmentally friendly given what goes into producing it. So again, this is a design choices and that we make when we finally choose the end materials of the product.
Yeah, like it has to have its benefit, right? And the forged carbon has that aesthetic that we like, it has the strength that we like, and the cost of that is the energy it consumes to be produced and the time it takes to produce.
Yeah.
So that at the end of the day, it works perfectly for what we needed the Hadean to be. It's the right material choice for it.
So it's pretty much necessary for the Hadean.
Yeah, for the shape we went for,
Yeah, we'll put up a video to show what's actually going in to like the intricacy of that Hadean deck, because the GTR is essentially a cavity. Like it's a hole that everything goes in. But if you look at the back end where the cutouts for, there's seals, there's motor, like the big heat sink, the air vents, the battery case, there's that many different, like you said, right angles, lips, not right angles.
Sealing faces. We have multiple sealing faces in there. It seals on
it's so detailed.
Edges. Yeah.
It's just incredible. It's all these 1%ers that go into. That's why we chose that material.
Yeah, so it pretty much had to go with the forge. So I guess it's the benefits outweighs or justifies the lack of, what would you say, or the extra energy that goes into it.
Or not the most efficient thing to make as well at the end of the day. But we wanted to make this integrated singular piece, and that's kind of how we got there. And it's kind of by pushing ourselves, I guess, to do that. We could have just had the similar thing to the GTR, but we pushed it to see what we could do. And it's a good result, but necessary.
That's an interesting point for anyone that is looking to get into, I guess, e-skateboards from like an eco-friendly point of view. Carbon is not necessarily the most eco-friendly choice.
It's true.
Whereas bamboo, you wouldn't really think about it just looking at it, but bamboo is actually more sustainable.
That's it. It's grown from the ground.
It grows quickly.
And it's
bamboo
fast.
just grows really quick.
Have you guys ever had bamboo at your house before?
It's a weed. Yeah.
The bamboo we use, it's sustainably grown in like actual farms or whatever they do.
Yeah.
So for a more eco-conscious board, the bamboo's more suitable than the carbon.
Yeah.
So
even compared to like a traditional skateboard, which uses like maple, like Canadian maple, that grows really slowly. Takes ages for it to like reach maturity, and then even then, I don't think they use the full length of the tree. Like it's only a specific part to get the veneers of the wood. So like a bamboo deck compared to even a traditional maple wood deck is a more sustainable deck. And then so you got that benefit of being a bit more environmentally friendly, but then you got a totally different ride feeling, which is another really interesting factor you get out of it because it's naturally shock absorbent.
Yeah.
It's a totally different feel on the foot. It's crazy. The bamboo or the Hadean, the carbon, they're so different, the ride feeling. So,
and that's a good point though you raised about the feeling of different woods underfoot, and it's so true. The bamboo does naturally have that spring to it, and it's generally quite flexy. And each batch too is always different. Yeah. You could have the exact same construction all the way through between a couple of decks, and they're never going to be the same. Some might be a bit flexy than others, but when you compare to hardwood. Yeah, if we use all hardwood entire that same thickness, it'd be just so strong. Like there'd be no flex to it at all.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, right? Getting the right amount of flex, so it has that different feeling to the carbon, but not so much that you're bottoming out all the time as well.
Yeah, and the look too. Like this frustrates me sometimes. Like we're always after a specific look and for the end result. And I like that slightly darker looking bamboo because I just think it looks just a bit more authentic, and that's just my design choice. But then we get different batches, and it depends on the season.
Changes,
and sometimes it's gonna be like a really blonde look, and
I think the age of the trees when they cut them down, and like how long they've been sitting there before they get turned into boards. We got a batch of GTRs. It was either earlier this year or late last year, and they were the darkest GTRs I'd ever seen.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
they look
good.
Yeah. It's like you kind of want to see that variation because it looks cool.
That's right. So we can't really, tell our suppliers, hey, we want all the dark because we're never going to get it.
Yeah.
We'll be waiting for ages. And but yeah, we're always asking for the right selections.
It's funny too. The forged is actually going to have a similar result because everyone's going to be slightly different. Like the marbling effect of the forged carbon. Lays up differently. It looks a little bit different in different lights. If you get some of the different pieces of carbon coming up more, like some are a bit more silvery and some are a little bit more warmer colors.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see, like customers having different types of forged out there as well. It's pretty consistent.
I want to bring up too, like how challenging it was to finally get that end right forged look that we wanted. Like I remember. So we've got a few different carbon factories that make our product, and they've been making our GTR and GT decks. And most of them didn't want to touch what we're trying to achieve. It's just because A, they physically couldn't do it, and B, because they were generally as like it's going to cause environmental impact for their factory. And they're governed under certain like rules of how much emissions their factory can produce. So that made it harder for us to work with different suppliers. Some of the suppliers could produce a particular type of carbon look, and it just didn't look authentic. It wasn't that true supercar aesthetic that we really aspired to for this board, and they were more like some of the early samples are like really shards of
consistent
carbon
chips, kind of.
Yeah. I don't think it was more
You can
like
almost see the
chipboards.
squares in it. You can almost see the weave again.
They're like flakes.
Yeah.
They're flakes. That's a good way to.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. They're flakes of carbon and then put together that way. And so all of our factories said, yeah, we can produce that. And we're like, no, it looks crap. That's not what we're trying to achieve here. This has to be a certain process to get what we need. And so I remember that's been I guess a production problem for us because we're being that particular on that look, and it's just harder to produce what we want.
Yeah.
So
The forged, I don't know too much about it, but the forged carbon was like started by Lamborghini and I think Callaway, the golf club brand.
yeah,
Like when they first started it, and that's the kind of look that we're going for, is that kind of the traditional forged carbon. Whereas there's other ones that have come out that seem like they're being a bit more consistent in the chipping process to kind of make it more mass manufacturable and a bit easier to do. But we're going back to that, like, these larger strands of carbon, which have a great aesthetic, but then also the strength benefits there too.
Yeah.
That's what we push for.
yeah,
It's an insanely different look. We got some of the decks we originally did, so we'll put up a side-by-side comparison so people can see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So on the aesthetic side of thing, like, you tell us which one you like,
yeah,
left or right.
You can't beat that marbled look we ended up with though.
And, and in the sun too, especially, that's where the forge really stands out on our boards. It just shines, and then the light and the dark, and you can really see it.
Now the contrast against that and the trucks, like the matte black of the trucks and the forged gloss finish, really good looking stuff. Yeah, it's really cool.
We definitely had a lot of debate internally. The earlier samples, we were just going to make everything matte. I remember the deck, we made 20 samples and they were all matte. And then the case was matte, the trucks were matte, and it looked good. And we were like, yeah. And then we said, can we just see a gloss one? We need to have a comparison. And then when the gloss turned up, it was next level. It just looked so much better quality. It definitely had that high end, vehicles inspiration to it. And so that's where we went. We debated and it was like, nah, we're going with gloss. That's it.
Yeah, it was no question once you saw it in person. Yeah, definitely. Another good thing about the carbon as well, I was just thinking, is how like it is super durable as a material. So like, it's a gloss finish, but it's really hard to damage carbon. Like you have to really
It doesn't degrade?
It doesn't degrade. Like it's non-corrosive. Obviously there's no metal in there. So yeah, like in terms of durability as well, like that deck is going to ride forever and it's going to maintain its strength and its form and its look, which is a really nice quality to it compared to, say, a bamboo deck or something like that. Like that does have a lifespan, whereas you're going to get a long ride out of your carbon deck.
Yeah.
As long as you look after everything else.
Well, we're going to keep working with carbon fiber. This is part of our signature. This is what, Evolve is known for. And we want to be as environmentally as friendly as we can. So we need to certainly keep that in mind about the materials that we work with.
And work with the factories that we learned, like forging is a chipped, we could recycle old carbon and possibly use that in our forged products. So we can learn more about it and maybe become more efficient or find more energy efficient ways to do it. Even it's just being solar powered factories or something. I'm sure there's solutions there to improve.
Yeah. I reckon there's a lot of opportunities ahead especially with the forge. How can we think outside the box further to make things a little bit different moving forward?
And we'll keep working with it and we'll keep learning and do cooler stuff, hopefully.
Yeah. We've got some cool things ahead. We're always evolving. We're always working and yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was good because we covered the carbon and the bamboo. So a bit of a all things deck material podcast for you.
Yeah.
But thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Check us out on the socials. If you have any questions about carbon decks or any of our build materials, drop a comment.